I'm Bill Russell, creator of This Week Health, where our mission is to transform healthcare one connection at a time. Welcome to Newsday, breaking down the health IT headlines that matter most. Let's jump into the news. All right, it's Newsday, and today we are joined by, I should just keep coming up with new adjectives for you people.
I know.
It's goofy for me.
I said goofy for Drex DeFord, and
I
I think incomparable for Sarah Richardson the last time. Actually, I'll put chat.
How about Dodger and Mariner fans?
Oh,
There you
Today.
go.
gee.
By the time this airs, there might be a World Series going on between the two.
No kidding. What's going to be the bet?
I don't know. We'll have to come up with that.
We'll come with something good because football's clearly in the can for me this year. I know we've got a decent record, but everybody is injured. So
We're going to
I'm
be,
gonna go
so
with
this is
the-
another one of those things that's coming up. We're going to be hanging out next week for Thursday Night Football in LA. And we'll have to formulate our bet
Want it
while
to
we're
be-
at the football game.
Yeah, I want it to be embarrassing. I was a Cardinals fan, and a friend of mine was a Cubs fan, and we made a bet on a series, and essentially I had to wear the Cubs jersey to the board meeting, which was really embarrassing. I mean, I had my suit on, but I had the Cubs jersey over top. And then, of course, you have to answer the question. It's like, oh, why are you wearing a Cubs jersey? It's like,
Oh, now
because
you got to tell the story.
gotta tell the story. Well, hey, we're getting ready. I'm heading out to Nashville tomorrow, and then we head to our various summits. We have 4 summits going on this weekend. I mean, by the time this airs, we will have been done the summits. What do you expect to hear at these summits? So we have 2 CIO summits and a CISO summit. We also have a CMIO summit going on that is actually chaired by the CMIOs, which is kind of awesome.
I
Correct.
love that.
I mean, do you expect to hear anything, a little different twist on what you normally hear at a CISO event?
I think it's interesting because the CISO events, well, I think most of our events usually are about half alumni, people who've been to summits or city tour dinners before, and then half new people who've maybe never been to a summit before. And this summit for the CISOs, I think 1 or 2 of the CISOs are alumni and the rest of the group are new people. So it'll be interesting to kind of hear. And a lot of them are from academic-based, university systems. It's going to be a really interesting conversation to see what they come up with. I think some of the chronic problems in healthcare are the chronic problems in healthcare, and we're probably going to talk about those. But there will be some new people in the room, and I know some of them, and they can be pretty provocative. So I'm expecting them to unload on the room.
What I like about that group is when we sort of throw it out and say, hey, talk about something that's working, you start to hear different things that people are doing to address the problems that are almost insurmountable, like recovery time in less than 24 hours or 48 hours. And at one point that recovery time was 30 days.
Yeah. Well, they talk about things like minimum viable hospital. And it's interesting because I think a lot of the conversations, I use this analogy all the time about my car's in the ditch, right? Like a lot of the conversation sometimes is the woe is me, my car is in the ditch. Oh, my car's in the ditch too. And like you can let them do that for a little while. There's a little bit of like misery loves company, group therapy thing that goes on. But pretty quickly they start to talk about like, sometimes it's about here's how I got my car out of the ditch. But sometimes it's like, these are the things I've tried and haven't worked. And those are super valuable to everybody else in the room too, because it's like, I was thinking about trying that, but why didn't that work for you? And we get into those conversations, which often leads to some new alternative route to get the car out of the ditch.
I love when Drex starts telling his stories. So Sarah and I just immediately go, oh, Uncle Drex is here. This is awesome. But yeah, a car in the ditch, that's a common one that you pull out to tell people. It's like, hey, we can wallow in this for a little bit because we should and just sort of commiserate. But let's talk about, what are we going to do about this car in the ditch?
Solutions.
Sarah, you have a little different twist on that event. You have next generation leaders in that room. What do you think next? Not the CIOs themselves. What do you think the next generation's thinking about?
So I love that we do the prep calls because you get the one-on-one time with every single person who is coming. And we're pretty specific in having them tell us, what are you thinking about that's working? What are you thinking about that's not working? Because then we're also crowdsourcing how much time do we want to spend on some of these topics pervasively. And people are proud of the usual things like, hey, we got to win in getting certain things approved, or we have a couple pilots that have gone well over here. But where a lot of the focus from the pre-conversations are, and I have a lot of application leaders in the room, which I love, because whether you're doing clinical, non-clinical together, separate otherwise, it's all going to fall on that person. It used to be hey, it was a point solution. No, it's all integrated. There's all third-party risk. So everyone's an expert now, or has to be, in understanding the foundational aspects. How well you connected to your CTO and your CISO, and then your applications can lay on top of that, some other aspects. But pervasively, the themes coming into this week, which I keep thinking it's next week, it's not, how AI-powered workforce tools are being utilized in organizations, whether it's virtual nursing, virtual note-taking, virtual activities for the doctors, the remote like activities that are out there are winning more and more. How I think technology is being deployed to extend some of the clinical reach. You're not replacing people, but you're making them more effective. Overall upskilling is a big deal in my pre-calls. Interestingly enough, the compensation transparency, like people know how much roles make, where do they make the most, and how do you actually create a career pathway so you're not getting poached at the magic years, 10 years as a clinical analyst in Epic, and someone steals you to go work at another company. And then also the technology leaders that can pull on Uncle Drex, that can tell a story effectively, they're getting the funding and the resources that others aren't because they know how to weave all of those different components into really thoughtful conversation with the people that they need to have on board to be able to make it work.
I think I'm going to get some sort of swag made with Uncle Drex on it. I think that's a thing. You know how on, it's not Jeopardy, Wheel of Fortune. On Wheel of Fortune, when they go to the final thing, they always give them like a bunch of, it's like, we're going to give you A, E, S, T, L, N kind of thing. It's like, we know that these letters are going to be picked. Now you get to pick three more. And I feel like every CIO event has AI, has governance, has some aspect of workforce, either upskilling, remote work, I don't know, team, culture, that kind of stuff, and some aspect of budget, period. I mean, budget or finance or, the governance conversation is usually not like, how do you stand up governance? It's usually, how do you create the mechanism to control the amount and velocity of projects coming at IT.
That's definitely one of the cars in the ditch conversations in all of our is, like there's unlimited demand and there's only so much of me. And like, how do I deal with that?
It's
Yeah.
a 30-year conversation. I've literally been having that conversation for 30 years, which means it will always be something we need to be thinking about how to morph and adapt and be more effective at understanding, especially with proliferation of tools we have today. What if you can't create all the capacity and demand that you need because of AI as an example? So then what?
I want to talk about, I started this series on upskilling, but I want to talk about, what does the world look like? So we are in the process as a company, we're standardizing our data sets, we are documenting our workflows, all the things I think you need to do in order to be ready for agentic AI. And one of the things we have done is we've held off on hiring certain roles because we're like, look, I think we're going to stand up these agents that are going to take this old job and this old job and this old job, which used to be like a full-time person. And I don't want to let somebody go. So it's like, let's run at the edge for now, because we're going to be rolling these things out in the next 3 months. And these agents, it's an interesting conversation that I'm hearing around these agents from this perspective. Some people are talking about treating them as if you're hiring another person. So you give them a hire date. You give them reviews, just like you give an employee review. Are they leaning towards bias? Are they still fulfilling what they should? Are they what's their error rate? And those kind of things. Same way you would, bring on a new employee. And onboarding's a thing as well. You have to give it context, right? So
It's
you have
training records. You got to put them through training. Yeah.
It's interesting. I think I'm going to push this concept more over the next 6 months in our city tour dinners and our summits, which is, okay, what does the workforce look like I don't think it'll be quick in healthcare. We can do it quickly because we're a small organization. But I think in healthcare, what does it look like over the next 2 years as you begin to bring up those agents? Because look, Microsoft's going to give them to you. CrowdStrike's going to give them to you. Workday's going to give them to you. ServiceNow is going to give them to you. We're going to be standing up agents, I believe, all over the place. Let's start there. Do you believe that we will be standing up agents across healthcare in the different disciplines that we oversee?
Yeah, no, for sure. And it's going to be a lot like today where you open up your whatever as a service application and there's a new button and it's an AI button and you can put things in there and it'll generate stuff for you. I think, when it's happening now. You open up the application and there are agents that can start working for you. All you have to do is tell them that you want them to go to work. Now, this is like a whole different skill set, though, right? It's not just cutting and pasting something into the application and getting something out. Like you might actually be outsourcing part of your job to this AI assistant who can then do a bunch of like grindy, hate it, boring work, but the assistant is brilliant at it. It's going to be really interesting to kind of see how we retrofit our teams to be able to handle that kind of new employee interaction.
Well, the other thing I've been thinking about is so it's going to be really important for us to document the workflow, to understand our data, and to understand our processes, because I think what's going to happen is the technology is going to keep changing. And so where we start is going to be a little heavier lift standing up these agents than I think 2 years from now will be. I think 2 years from now, and Microsoft sort of introduced us to this concept and then the privacy people went nuts. But essentially, you're going to have something on your computer that is watching how you work, and it's going to say,
Mhm.
do you want me to do that for you? And Apple's been a little behind on this, but I think we're starting to feel it a little bit on our phones. But I think we will start to feel it on our PCs. Look, computer vision can watch all the things we're doing today and mimic what we're doing. But the thing is, the way we do them is sort of stuck in the past. Like we go to a browser, we log in, we do, and with APIs and whatnot, it's like, the AI agent would say, why are you doing that? I'm just going to go over here, update this record, pull this across, and update everything. And then the next time you look at it on your phone, it's going to be updated.
You're going to wind up with, I mean, agents that are going to work well with other agents too, right?
Right.
Across applications, the Workday agent's going to work really well with, I don't know, the Epic agent or something. They will figure out their own work relationship. And I think sometimes too, I'm with you. I think for us, we've spent a lot of time documenting the workflow, documenting the data. I don't think we're far from agents who are going to say, let me help you with that.
Right.
Like, it's a mess in here. I can help you sort of, sweep up all this broken glass and give you some ideas about where this stuff really is. Where is your data? What are you doing with that data normally? What does good look like compared to all the other customers that agents like me service in the healthcare industry? What does good look like? Because I can actually crowdsource that great behavior and try to help you get to that point faster. It's really interesting.
Sarah, you talk a lot about transparency, and I think it's the right topic here because, when we hire a new employee, we're able to see their work and we're able to sort of monitor their work, and we're able to sit down with them and go, hey, why don't you evaluate yourself? And we'll evaluate you. And then we'll sit down and we'll see how those things sort of come together, and we'll determine, where we go from here. And maybe we give you a job change, maybe we promote you, maybe that kind of stuff. But with AI, some of these tools are kind of dark. They're kind of black box esque. Like
Mhm.
we're not sure why it made that decision, but it made a good decision this time, but it made a bad decision this time. How do you, I mean, transparency is going to be critical.
The thing that worries me the most, and I love technology, I'm a big fan of, anything that can make your life a little bit easier. But I also was at a recent event, a pretty big investor meeting, and one of the people was like, hey, when can we go back to paper? Because, not that we actually will, and here's why. How many critical thinking skills have people lost because of their dependency on technology today? I think about, adding the tip or negotiating the sale on something, and it's still pretty routine, but I know like 5 phone numbers anymore in my life. And I used to know 100 more phone numbers. But that level of like memorization and acuity kept me pretty darn active. I'm thinking like I remember phone numbers from when I was 10 years old, but I don't know either one of your phone numbers at all. Like I don't even know what your area code is anymore. And my biggest concern with the transparency of the usage of agentic AI and beyond is how do we teach the humans that are part of it the critical thinking skills to be able to effectively manage an agent? Because very quickly, an agent can be quote unquote smarter than you. The other thing is when you displace that many humans from things that make them feel like they matter, and I'll steal a quote from David Jim Bruno that humans are meaning making machines. If you have thousands, hundreds of thousands of people that no longer have purpose or meaning because there's not necessarily a job that's fulfilling their full capability, what happens to that civil aspect, to that civic aspect of what we are responsible for as the purveyors of all of this technology?
You know what, Sarah? I don't worry about your first one. I do worry about your second one. The first one I don't worry about because I remember that's how old I am. I remember when we went to math class and can we use a calculator? Can we not use a calculator?
Yeah.
It's like, no, you have to learn how to do math. And I was like, okay. But I can't tell you the last time I like pulled out the formula for statistical probability. I mean, I don't do it anymore. And and the same thing with the calculator. It's like, it's like the smarter the calculator, the more they were like, oh no, that knows the formula. Like you have to
Like
memorize.
cheating.
Yeah, you're cheating. I'm not worried about the fact that you don't have to know phone numbers. I mean, there's any number of a million ways, and it's one of those things that I think is, in terms of practicing at the top of your license, I think it's one of the lower things in terms of practicing at the top of your license. I am worried about the second one, which is humanity and meaning for people. But I think this is part of Maslow's hierarchy. I think it's like, okay, we're going to take care of this. You can now move up to this and start thinking about higher level things. When you think about it, one of the things that frustrates me about being in health IT is, we're nipping around the corners when in reality, we're functioning in a failed system. It'd be nice if we put all of our energy on fixing the failed system instead of, oh, if we could do this, we could tweak this and get more money from the insurance carrier and get paid a little bit more over here. And
Yeah.
you're like,
Yeah.
let's just fix that thing altogether would be a great source of our thinking and energy, I think.
But you don't fix that as the CIO of a healthcare system.
Yeah,
That fix
but
comes at the policy and insurance level
but
to a
I,
degree. Once you start having self-insured plans.
but I'm saying I think everybody moves up a level. I think everybody, the person who was typing on the keyboard is now overseeing agents. I think the person who was doing project management is now doing product management and design. I think the person who was a CIO is now really being elevated to think about, okay, how is technology going to play a role in changing the system? I think, and the CEOs are functioning more like policymakers and saying, hey, you know what, this is what's happening in my hospital. And this is maybe how we go about it. Because the reality is, Congress and the Senate and that whole system has a proven not good at solving the problem that ails us, which is health.
Yeah, but you're going to keep seeing a divide. So there's the whole group you just talked about that's going to be up here in this quadrant. I firmly believe there are more people in that lower quadrant, and that's going to create a bigger economic and social divide than it ever has before. It's been a slow burn over the last few decades, but it's accelerating faster than ever. There's a lot of people who I don't believe can get there. And so we're then responsible for that well-being or caring for those individuals in society and otherwise. And I'm talking about underdeveloped nations as much as what we see here in our own country. And so all we're doing is create a bigger divide. So what are we doing about the middle? This is not a political conversation. It's what are we doing about the middle people that are affected or those that really don't have the capability to do exactly what we're talking about because they were the ones who were doing those other jobs.
You're going to drag me into this. I don't care about the divide. I just care that the lower is high enough that they have a really good quality of life and the life they want to live. I don't care that there's a massive gap between the top and the bottom. I just care that the bottom is high enough that they have a good quality.
There's some kind of floor that
Yeah.
everybody's above
Fair.
the floor. Yeah. Nobody's in the basement.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And the reason people are flooding into the United States and Europe and other things is because the basement in some of the places they're coming from is so low that they want to get to our basement.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if technology can raise that bar, to your point, then we're going to be achieving more than one aspect of advanced technology.
Let's deal with something else that Sarah has been pushing us on, which is the sustainability of AI. There's a belief that one day you're going to wake up and AI is going to be gone because, again, Maslow's hierarchy, at the bottom, you need power and you need water in order to fuel this whole thing.
Yeah.
We see these organizations doing deals with power companies and standing up 3 Mile Island again and doing that kind of stuff. How concerned should healthcare organizations be about their AI usage, and how do they balance that with not falling behind in the world that they live in?
Man, it's such a hard, we were talking about, the new OpenAI Sora that came out. And so, you think about every time you make a Sora video, how much power do you push through an NVIDIA processor to make that goofy dancing elephant thing, whatever it is that you're making,
I think I made fun of you for that.
Talking babies, like, how much did that cost power wise to make? Yeah, I mean, I think we all worry about that. And it's interesting too. There's a lot more now NIMBY, not in my backyard stuff starting to happen too, where power companies or companies are coming to communities and saying, we're going to build a giant data center, or we're going to build a big power facility here. And the community's saying, no, you are not. We're not having that here. You're not going to use up all of our water for that. You know, I don't know what the answer to it is ultimately. If we're going to go down this path and we're going to do a bunch of AI and there's a ton of chips running in giant data centers, ultimately the power has to come from somewhere. And the cooling has to come from somewhere. Yeah, I don't know that we have a great answer for that right now. There are a lot of communities who are involved in these brawls that aren't happy with how things are going. But maybe there's a happy medium there somewhere in the discussion between the companies who are trying to build this stuff and the communities where they have to live.
That's interesting, almost like a utility. And the utilities are, state by state, region by region.
Well, and health systems are supporting all of this too, right? So when a company comes in and builds something like this, it's these are all stressors on the health systems as they're designed today. Do they need to grow? Do they need to shrink? What kind of specialties do they need? Can they handle supporting that kind of a new workforce? And can it move fast enough to be able to support that kind of a workforce and that kind of explosive growth that sometimes happens when these kind of facilities are built? So there's a lot of things I think for us to think about. For health systems, a lot of it is watching your own local community, watching your own state and local community, seeing where these things are happening and thinking about that. How's that going to affect our growth plan? Do we have facilities there? Should we be putting a hospital? Maybe that's an opportunity to buy a rural hospital if you're a big health system, because there's going to be a great payer mix there 2 years from now. So you got to think about all of that as a
Sarah,
system.
you keep bringing this topic up, and thank you for doing that, by the way. I mean, it, what's the happy medium? Gian Bruno wants to use your AI. Are you going to slow him down at all? I mean,
Well, do you remember when people used to protest Walmart going in because it would decimate a town? It's not a dissimilar conversation. And so,
Mhm.
what was that happy medium, if there even was one, that came out of some of that capitalistic aspects of why we say yes to certain decisions?
and it did decimate towns. Like you
It
can
did.
you can drive through
Yep.
some of these towns in the Midwest and see where the old shopping centers used to be. Now, some of them have revived, but some of them are still completely decimated.
I live in a town where there's probably more things that close than open on a regular basis. And I'm talking about services. Why? Because there's Costco on either side within a 30-mile radius, and probably Walmart, so I refuse to go to Walmart. And yes, I will publicly state that every chance that I get, just because lots of reasons. So all of that being said, if I won't go to Walmart, am I using AI? Am I driving a combustible engine? The answer on the combustible engine is yes. I think a lot of it depends on back to that transparency of like, where do you live? How is it impacting? If our decision making is inclusive of the impact of humans, of the environment, of other aspects of what we need to be considering, those are the pieces that get left out. We were all fortunate enough to be raised in conversations with households that had those conversations. If you do this, then that. Sort of like the and or, like back to programming language. If this, then that. And here are some of your options. What option do you choose when you're informed? And then that goes back to how we responsibly make sure that AI, it's more than just accuracy. So if it's about energy efficiency, it's also about bias mitigation. It's also about how it's benefiting what we already talked about earlier, that underserved population. But how are you sourcing the information to make decisions that itself is not just an algorithm driven to the things that you already believe? You have to be exceptionally curious and really want to know, how is my usage of X, Y, and Z going to impact the environment? It's like, are you using plastic? Are you using CFCs, like is a hole in the ozone that came up in the 80s, my responsibility because I went from using aerosol to pumps, like, but then those are made out of plastic. So it's just this constant cycle. I would say for every human being, the ability to understand the impact of what you're using and the decisions you're making in a way that makes you feel good about it, or if it doesn't make you feel good about it, at least less bad about it. We all need to know how what we are utilizing for the advancement is also going to play out long term. I don't even have kids, and I think about this stuff all the time. Y'all have grandkids. Like, what is the world they are going to inherit, and how are you making it better or worse for them? Because you know what? In 40 years, I'm out, if I'm lucky to go 40 more years. So, why do I care so much? Well, because it's still my responsibility as a human being to make it better than I found it.
I do care about the environment. I care what we do to the environment, and there's there's a lot of principles around it, leave it better than you found it. And what's the PG version of this? Don't trash where you eat.
Oh, yeah.
Like, this is the world we live in. Don't screw it up. But the pragmatist in me just goes back to, I think this is something NVIDIA is going to have to solve by making chips that are, more
Power hungry. Yeah.
and the companies that generate power are going to have to figure out how to get AC closer to those data centers so you don't have 70 to 80% power loss across an AC line before it actually gets to where it's going to be used. Just think about that. We have 70 to 80% loss because we decided to go AC instead of DC in terms of power. And if we had gone DC, we would have had to put in 1 million more power plants. But the power plant would be right next to or in the neighborhood where you lived, and we would not have had as much power loss. Well, I don't know. We should revisit some of those things. I always come back to this, and you guys aren't as much fans as you used to be, but I come back to my Tesla car, and it's not that it's a EV. That's not really the thing that changed the world. It's that it's 16 years old, and I have no desire to replace it, and I don't have to.
It just keeps working and working.
It's a simple design, has a simple motor, has very few moving parts. It's a nice design, and it just keeps working. And so even today, when people get in my car, like, oh, this is so cool. I'm like, it's 15 years old, but that they get into and they go, man, this is a really nice car. One of the things Elon Musk did is he simplified the crap out of that car to the point where 15 years later, you still get into it and go, this is nice. I could use some new seats. Like my seats are getting not ratty, but they're old. Yeah. But outside of that, it held up and it runs. And people are like, well, what about the battery? Eventually you're going to put that battery in the landfill. I'm like, well, it started at 280 miles. It's now down to 225 miles. But I still find myself, I don't drive 200 miles.
It's your point about, and this is a thing we talk about all the time too, innovation. And what is innovation and what really drives innovation? I think there are a lot of people who talk about being innovative because they're able to buy things from vendor partners and install it and use it, and they think that's super innovative. But I think the real definition of innovation might be the thing that ultimately gets us out of this. It's going to take too much power to run AI and all of that. When you don't have resources, that is the time that you are the most innovative because you have to figure out how to do something and you don't have anything to do it with. So you can be super ingenious figuring out ways to make that work. And as you sort of alluded to, NVIDIA re-engineering chips to be more power efficient, to consume less power. They don't have any choice. There's no way there's enough power plants are going to be built to meet the demand.
Remember when DeepSeek came out? They had limited chips and stuff that they could deal with. So they created a model that uses a lot less power and a lot less compute to train the model. And I'm like, yeah.
And then they rewrote the model so that the model could work better with the chips that they had. Constraints force innovation to happen. It's not the plethora of resources that make innovation happen, honestly. I think it's the lack of resources that makes really good innovation happen.
We talk about this all the time in our summits with our CIOs and CXOs. If you can optimize your workload to reduce the computational waste, like fix the process and then put the technology on top of it. If that is synonymous with also how we're thinking about more responsible consumption of energy or utilization, you've got to win on both parts. That goes back to that transparency factor. I'm not just going to automate something that sucks. I'm going to automate something that I've optimized. And I have to throw in a little plug for Toyota. Go with the Demi models. Go with the Toyota models. Because guess what? My car is 17 or almost 18 years. How old is she? Do the math. She's 18 years old. Guess what? Still runs. Still works. Toyota. And I will always keep that car. I love that car.
It applies to everything, right? Simple is better. Simpler is easier to operate. It takes less energy to run. It's easier to understand when something's going wrong, what actually has gone wrong. And it's easier to innovate on it because you understand how it works. So you can figure out that, oh, if I do this one more thing, I'm going to be able to get 1 more mile to the gallon.
Drex, it's the secret of turnarounds, right? You go in and one of the first things you do is, we're going to simplify this environment. And
simplify.
A year later, people are like, oh my gosh, you guys are so much, less downtime and you're so much more efficient. You're doing more projects. Like, yeah, because we're not dealing with all the crazy complexity that somehow we allow into our lives. And we all know how it happens. Like I'm doing process reengineering with one of our teams, and it just, so I said something 2 years ago, they took it to heart, and then they, kept building processes around it. And what I said 2 years ago isn't valid anymore.
Yeah.
And I'm
You
like,
have to relook all the time and say, my belief system is tethered to anchors that I put into the ground 5 years ago or 6 months ago. Are those really the places I want to be anchored? And you have to be willing to like let go of that. And that change is really, Sarah talks about this all the time, but that change is super hard for most people. I mean, if you think about our healthcare system in general, kind of go back to the original conversation, how did we get here? What a mess. How could we have let this happen? It's because it's just been one thing piled on the next thing, piled on the next legislation, piled on new regulations, piled on state by state decisions about how to run things. And suddenly we have this, that cartoon that has like a giant machine and then there's like a tiny peg in the corner and it sort of points to that little peg and it says, this piece has been run by a guy for 45 years who's about ready to retire. I feel like that's the thing that we've built as the healthcare model in our country.
and the crazy thing is insurance didn't even exist. Like, what is it, 60 years ago?
16? Yeah.
But I mean, it's like a new concept, and everyone thinks like, oh, everyone has to have it. Well, it started off as just a benefit for certain employees. And now it's like, oh no, this is like the entire system. And that's exactly what happened over the years. It's like, oh, this is good. We should expand it to this. Oh, we should do this. We should expand it to this. Oh no, it should cover everybody. No, should, and oh, the government should do this. And you just look at it over the years and you're like, oh my gosh, this is Frankenstein's monster.
It is.
Is it the Marines that say adapt, overcome, improvise? Is that their motto? Partially. One of the armed forces.
Yeah.
So it kind of applies to everything. Ever since I heard that, almost 50 years ago, I'm like, wow, that kind of works everywhere.
Kind of works everywhere.
Yeah, I used to talk to my team all this Semper Fi, always faithful, is like the Marine Corps mantra. And for my teams, I had a tiny little man. He was green. I called it Semper Gumby. That was our motto, always flexible. And it was always about trying to figure out the best way to do the thing that we need to do today.
Uncle Drex is back, and we will
There he is.
on that.
And there we are.
Love it. Thanks for listening, everybody. That's all for now. That's Newsday. Stay informed between episodes with our daily insights email. And remember, every healthcare leader needs a community they can lean on and learn from. Subscribe at thisweekhealth.com/subscribe. Thanks for listening. That's all for now.